this, another West London VR race preview. This one, the NATO mission. NATO, of course, the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, a military organisation, and we're going to finish outside one of their European headquarters, northward, just northwest of London, in northwest. And we're starting off from here. We're in Northwood itself. We're going to do a big loop. You can see the blue sign there. That's the entrance to a hospital. That's Mount Vernon Hospital. Well, two hospitals we're going to pass on this route. And you can see it's fairly flat here, and we are going to be on the flat till we get to the village of Harefield. So we're sort of heading westwards, and when we get to Harefield, we'll turn northwards. Down a big descent. We're going to go along the River Valley, the Colne Valley, and eventually we will turn right and head up the final hill up to the NATO headquarters. Now, this is basically going to be a very fast race until that hill at the end, and that is where we believe the race will be decided. So, just to recap, it's basically flat, then a fast downhill, fast along a flat valley, and then finally that climb up to the finish, where we believe that each race will be decided. So, as you can see, speeding along quite nicely, generally flat here, not too much to report as we head towards Harefield. As I say, heading westwards, you see a slight bend here, nothing too much. These are of course nicely smooth when we get them onto the Wildly RGT platform, and we'll just swing around a little bit again. We could turn right in this area and cut through and rejoin the course further up. So basically, geographically, we're heading west. You see the turning there just coming out. That will cut down to quite near the foot of the climb at the end, but we're going a long way around to do this loop via Harefield and back. So, as I say, heading westwards, and it'd be northwards, effectively down the hill, then eastwards, and then southwards, back up the hill again. It doesn't quite join together, although we do finish somewhere that's not too far from where we started. It's not a complete loop, so you can have a look at it. It's on Ride with GPS, and we do links from the website at www.westlondoncycling.com. You can have a look at the route geographically, and of course the profile of it, so you can see just exactly what the hills look like, and it's the hill at the end, of course, that you'll be most interested in. We promise you there are no roadworks when we actually run the thing on the platform. There's a bit of editing there, and the light magically goes green as we speed through past the bollards. Nobody, of course, doing any work, but nevertheless, I'm sure these companies have to store their bollards somewhere, so why not put them on the road and keep us all waiting. You can see some holes are being dug in the ground. I should imagine this is some sort of pipeline that's being put in under the road. You can see lots of little patches where they've been working before, little patches of tarmac on the top of the road. So we're back, and we're still going straight, heading towards Harefield, as I try to ride on the smooth new bits of tarmac rather than the bumpy old bits. So this is, as I say, just northwest of London. Harefield, technically, actually, we are still just in London, despite all the trees you're seeing here in the countryside. You see a London red bus going past there. This is just inside the border of London and Hertfordshire, so you, as I say, technically we are still in London, but we are going to just about cross over into Hertfordshire as we hit Harefield, the last little inhabited village before we cross the border. It's the outskirts of Harefield. It retains some old charm, but it's not one of these villages that's been maintained to look as if it hasn't changed for 200 years. There's old and new buildings making it up, and there is, of course, Harefield Hospital in Harefield as well, which is one of the world's leading heart transplant hospitals. They're very specialists in it, and have a great reputation for it as well. So quite an important hospital here at Harefield, the second of two that we're going to pass. I'm sure there's some sort of military hospital in the NATO headquarters, but that's obviously far too secret for them to tell us, so we'll keep it to two known of hospitals in the area. Funnily enough, of all things, a Polish guy was telling me about some secret military organisations from the Cold War in this area that I had not previously known about. So I think quite a lot going on in terms of headquarters and military bases in the area. Now, we're going to turn right just here. This is coming into the more inhabited part of Harefield. We turn right at this junction by the post office and then head down to the village green. We'll see in a moment. So now just avoiding the potholes round the corner, making sure it's clear as we come up to the crossroads in the centre of the village with the village green on our right there. You can see a war memorial just poking up on the right as we head towards the roundabout. Now we're going to go straight across here and that will take us onto the hill and down to the Coy Carp pub. If you know that, if you are from the area, you'll probably be well aware where the Coy Carp is. So it's that climb or that hill we're going down as we go over the roundabout, past the pub and the fishing tackle shop. And this is effectively the beginning of the descent down to the Coy Carp, where it crosses over the Grand Union Canal. And I should imagine the River Colne as well, both running parallel down the valley. The canal obviously built down the valley to keep it as level as possible as it heads north to south. The Grand Union Canal goes from London to Birmingham, and of course in the days before railways, when these canals were built, would have been effectively the motorways, autoroutes, highways of the day, as barges pulled by a horse along the canal would have been faster than anything known to man at that time. Mankind, that is, not man. So here we are, you can see the descent gathering speed. Now this is quite a long descent, I mean certainly for this area, and you can just about detect the view. You probably can't because of the hedge, but you kind of get the impression if you look in the gaps of the hedge of what the valley looks like as you can see over to the other side. Unfortunately the GoPro we record on is on the handlebars. If it was at eye level, you get a stunning view from here. Although it is blighted currently, as there are a lot of works going on there as they build a new railway line from London to Birmingham, and they're building tunnels for it. So there's a lot of soil coming out from underground and chalk and things that is all piling up, and there's a lot of works and digging equipment that you'd see on the view if you could get it. Now this guy's just turning right, so we'll cut inside of him and keep the momentum going. As I say, you can just about get an idea of the view from here. As you can see across the top of the valley in the gaps, as I have just said. It gathers speed quite a lot down here, and it's a nice little bend at the bottom. It won't bother you on a virtual race. We're getting towards the bottom now. This is the steepest bit just around here. Of course, I'm familiar with that from coming up it rather than down it. And when you are going down it, of course, in real life, you see all these potholes and the camera jumping about. It could do with doing something about that road surface. However, I think it, for cyclists at least, gives you good warning to slow down, because at the bottom you get these traffic lights, and if you were going too fast, you might struggle to get the brakes working enough to get through them. It's the only reason for the traffic lights is it's a very narrow bridge going over the river and canal, as you'll see in a moment. And as we go around this bend, I don't think you'll be able to see on the camera, but just beyond there, there's a lot of kayaking, and there's lots of poles sticking up where all the kayakers. I don't know what they do. It's sort of like a slalom thing that they all practice in their canoes. And we go over the other side and past the car park of the Coy Carp. You can see the Coy Carp sign there. A well-known landmark restaurant and pub in the area. Now this is very flat. We're into the Colne Valley here. This is a nice stretch of road, this one. You can get some great speed on here, both virtually and in real life. And for some reason, it seems to me one of those roads that in real life, whichever way the wind's blowing, you seem to get a good speed on this road. And I think that is because it's very sheltered with all the trees. As I say, it's quite a popular escape route out of London, this road, so you generally would see quite a few cyclists on it. Not necessarily today, but as I say, it is one of those little escape routes that we all use because it's nice and flat. So we're in the Colne Valley, and there's lots of sort of kind of lakes and reservoirs along this valley, this flat section. If you do get a glimpse behind the trees here, you'll probably see a big lake, stroke reservoir. There's quite a few of them around here, which I assume help feed London's water supply, but they're kind of made to look as natural as possible, and I'm sure they're used by fishermen, etc. Although I don't know that for a fact, as I'm not a fisherman. So, you can see it's in terms of the race you're going to do, you're going to have a lot of speed because you come off the hill, and the peloton will have gathered a lot of speed. we do tend to find that the peloton sometimes splits up on those hills and regroups at the bottom. So make sure you don't get dropped on the hill, otherwise you might be in one of the second or third pelotons rather than the leading one, or if you anticipate being in the second one, you might be further back than you thought. There's a sharp right here, just at this pub, as we go down the old Uxbridge Road, running parallel to the A412, which itself, talk about roads being replaced. This was the original road from Watford to Uxbridge. It's been replaced by a road about 200 metres to our left, which was the A412, which was a big looping road that went round the north of London in a big loop, and that itself has now been replaced by the M25 motorway. So 3 generations of roads replicating this stretch, this journey from Uxbridge to Watford. We're on the very old section, which is great for cycling because, as you can see, there's no traffic on this bit. They'll all be on the road just to our left. Slightly potholy, but again, this is not a factor in a virtual race. And of course, this is deadpan flat. So make sure you're in the peloton, or a peloton level, I suppose is the best thing to say. We do like these races to split out into pelotons so that people find themselves in a group of their own sort of similar ability, if you like, and they can have their own little sprint offs in sort of Group 2, Group 3, etc. And occasionally, of course, it gets exciting because somebody from the first group will not quite make one of the junctures and get left behind in Group 2, which can up the ante a little bit. And of course, if they don't manage to get back on the first one, great amount of points can be lost in the competitions. Remember, there's plenty of classifications in West London VR virtual series, so have a look on the website and you can get all the details of what you need to do to win one of those. www.westlondoncycling.com with all the details from all the series of West London VR, which has now been running a few years. Now, this is the A412, so we've lost our little cycling special thing. We're going to go along the main road, the A412, the London North Orbital Road, because it orbited London, well, still does. Although you can see the traffic is not too bad. When I was a younger person, before they built the M25, this was an absolutely heaving road, bumper to bumper, fender to fender, if you're American, traffic along the road. And of course, when they built the highway, the motorway, the M25 auto route, this road lost a lot of its traffic. You can always tell when there's an accident though on the M25 because everybody comes down to this road. So dead flat, as we can see, and still rolling along at a fair pace, and this will be what happens in the race. So I think what you might see here is some of the lead riders put pressure on the front, and this is not to escape, but if you can thin the front peloton out with some attacks, you seem to lose a few riders. So what they like to do, without necessarily going out there for a long time, they like to put bursts on the front and see how many riders they can drop from the group. If you get dropped from the group and you're not really contending for the title, don't worry, because this is how it's kind of set up to work. Is that what you'll do is you'll find yourself in another group. If you are on your own, our tip, it's not always the right thing to do, but most of the time you're probably better off waiting to get caught by the next group and getting into the next peloton rather than trying to solo it. The solo effect, because the draft is so good on Wahoo RGT, the peloton behind you will have so much advantage. If you expend a lot of energy trying to keep ahead of them, you'll probably fail. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this rule. You might be a very strong rider and it might be so close to the end that it's worth it, because if the peloton does catch you, you could lose half a dozen places in the sprint, and that wouldn't be worth it. So depending on where you are, how you feel and how good you are, you might or might not want to just drop back and let the next peloton catch you, get in the peloton, and you'll be in a better position as we go past another rider sharing the A412 with us. Now, this is a little roundabout that's coming up that won't really feature in the race. You won't notice it. There'll just be a little sort of kind of bend in the road, if you like. But once upon a time, when they were building the M25, this was the end, because they hadn't. They opened it in sections. It's basically a big ring that goes around London, but they opened it in phases, and this is where it used to end. So the road on your right, which we quite happily cycle up now, was once it didn't allow cyclists originally because it was the M25 when it ended at this roundabout, but we cycle up and down it more often than up, should I say. It's fantastic coming down it because it's a nice fast slope, and actually because it's dual carriageway and motorway size, all cars can get around you quite easily. This is Maple Cross. We're heading towards Rickmansworth next. If you know Rickmansworth, it's just near Watford, northwest of London. We're in Hertfordshire, as I said, and we will turn back towards Middlesex and Northwood, where the NATO mission is. I'm not 100% sure whether the NATO mission at Northwood is actually in London or Hertfordshire, because it's right on the border, and it is possible that it's technically in Hertfordshire, but Northwood itself is actually in London, so I can't help you on that one. I'm not entirely sure, but Northwood is in London, and the border is about where the NATO headquarters is, so it may or may not be in London or Hertfordshire. We're in Hertfordshire now, still very, very flat as we go along this A412, the old London North Orbital Road, towards Rickmansworth. There's going to be nothing of note. There's slight undulations in this, but you're not going to notice the speed you're going on a virtual race as we go along here. This is going to be dead flat. So we will have built up a very, very, very good time at the front of the race by now, with that big downhill and just this almost pan flat section along the Colne Valley. We're tracing the River Colne still as we head towards Rickmansworth. Still on our right there are big lakes. In fact, Rickmansworth has turned one of them into a big aquadrome, and of course the canal, the Grand Union Canal, is also down along this valley to our right. So pretty much behind all these houses is lots of lakes, canals and rivers. Perhaps not plural in canals and rivers, but canal, river and lakes. And to our left it starts getting hillier as you go into the Chiltern Hills, which again are sort of northwest of London, and where we do a lot of our cycling. If you live in West London, you will have cycled out to the Chilterns. They're out of the heartland for cycling, with some nice little climbs in there, nothing too long or too high, a few steep ones though, so it can be quite testing out there as we head into the more sort of built up suburbs of Rickmansworth. Still on the flat. We're going to go through Rickmansworth and we're going to go up to a place called Moor Park, and that's when we start gently rising through Moor Park, but there eventually will be a sharp right turn, and that will be the hill to the finish. But here we are still on this river valley, so this is going to enable you to get some good speed up, tuck into the peloton, save your energy for that hill at the end if you can. As I say, the explosive, really strong riders will completely ignore that tip, and they will push for little sprints off the front here to just see if they can thin out the front peloton as we go along this river valley. But as I say, if you're not minded to do that, just get in this and you get yourself a very good time. Points for everybody in these races. Wherever you finish, you will get a point in the race, and I'll say a point. Most people will get more than 1 point, but it's depending where you finish, of course. And of course there are the points for various classifications in the way you can win prizes at the end of the series. So nothing more to report in terms of profile on this. We're still on that flat bit. We're coming up to Rickmansworth and a couple of roundabouts. These will pass the old car there. These roundabouts, as I say, you won't detect them necessarily on the course because they'll just come across as bends the way we set it up. You see A412 written into the road there. That's going off to the left, but we're going to take the road towards Watford, and we're not going to go to Watford, we're going to go to Moor Park instead, but we'll carry on this roundabout. We're going to hit another roundabout in a moment, head towards Watford down that road, and there'll be a sharp right up to Moor Park, and then we start actually gently going uphill to Moor Park, but then the proper ascent starts as we leave there and head towards Northwood. So again, still flat. The Rickmansworth Aquadrome is just on our right behind those hedges. All sorts of water sports in there. As I say, they've got all these lakes which double up as, I think, water storage as well, and there's plenty of, as I say, fishing and water sports in the area. Right, as I say, Rickmansworth Aquadown just to your right along this little stretch of road, which again we can go quite fast on, although you can see the road surface is a little bit worn out. Obviously too many cyclists using that little channel just by the yellow lines, well worn and a little bit lumpy, but we do get good speeds along here in both directions. There is actually a cycle path on the right, but it's not, if you're going to go fast on a road bike, it's probably not ideal because you get ducks on it, believe it or not, out of the lakes, all sit on that path, and of course there are pedestrians on it. Shared path, so if you want to go fast, probably safer to go on here. So we hit the next roundabout. We've got one more to come after this. Rickmansworth with I think about 4 roundabouts on its little ring road as you go around the outside of it. You don't see the town, which is on our left as we go over this bridge, and this heading us up to the last of the big roundabouts, and a nice view of my gloves. All to something anyway. Probably the bike computer, I guess. Nevertheless, despite that interruption, you can see there's a slight rise and dip there as we go over the canal again, but I don't think this will particularly notice on your race, because you'll be going so fast you'll be up and over it before you know it. Last of the roundabouts, and we head off towards Watford. So enjoy the last bit of the flat as we go along here, and it is going to start to rise all the way to the end. Now I will say the main rise up to the NATO headquarters in Northwood, the one nice thing about it, both if you're doing this virtually or in real life, is that it is stepped. So it goes up a little bit, then the gradient drops, then goes up a little bit more, and the gradient drops, and then goes up a little bit more to the end. And the bit towards the end is probably the least steep bit from memory of cycling it. So I would say it's not the worst climb in the world because you do get the respite. The trouble is, what you're doing in one of our races is, as the name suggests, racing, and it's all very well getting to one of the soft spots in the climb and saying I'll take a little bit of a rest before I tackle the next incline, but of course your rivals will not be thinking the same. So it means I think you've got to sustain the effort all the way up with that in mind, but there is a little bit of kind of easier sections twice up the hill. Now we're leaving Rickmansworth now as we head towards Moor Park. Moor Park is a private housing estate with some very nice well-to-do houses on it. Consequently, where we do turn into Moor Park, it is gated because they're private roads for the residents, but they're very amenable. They do let you in, and the barrier is such that you can cycle around it. I have been to private housing estates in Surrey where they put up gates that you just can't get through to keep people like us out, but Moor Park much more accommodating. And I think one of the things about Moor Park is it, despite being a private estate, it actually has a London Underground tube station in the middle of it. So I think they'd probably be hard pressed to gate up an estate and deny the rest of us access to their railway station. They've got a very well-to-do school there as well, Merchant Taylors, if you've heard of that, which is one of the great old, I'd say public schools. It's not a public school because it's a private school, because it was set up for Merchant Taylors, or the sons of Merchant Taylors, one of the guilds back in the day. So here we are, we're going to turn into Moor Park, the private housing estate, and just following the forward and go past another cyclist. This is the barrier, which is actually up for us at the moment, but it's only because the car went through it, and onto that private housing estate. Speed bumps so that we don't all run races down here, which is why we have to obviously run our races virtually down here. You can see a nicely kept road as well, and I don't think the residents here are too short of money, it has to be said. And it is quite a nice little run because you don't get too many cars up here, and at the same time it's well kept tarmac, and As I say, it's a gentle slope. I mean, I'm not sure quite how much you'll notice this, but you've been on the flat for a long time during this race, and this is a gentle climb. This is a precursor to where we're going to actually end up on the final climb up to the NATO. This is this is very gentle, although you are going to experience a little dip and a couple of ramps before we get to the main drag. So I'll just talk you through those in a moment. So this is probably about as much as this gentle one goes, but the road needs to dip down because it needs to go under the railway bridge. Now you mentioned that I remember that I mentioned that there was a London Underground station on here. Well, the railway is not underground out here in the suburbs. It's actually overground at this point. It's only underground in the centre of London. So we're going to have to dip under a railway bridge, which means then we have to climb back out of that, up a slight hill, and then there's a little bit more of a hill before we get up to not Moore Park Golf Club, sorry, it's another golf club, Sandy Lane Golf Club. Now as we get up to that, then we go flat out. So here's the railway bridge, so we go under here. As you can see, we have to dip down to go under this, and that sort of means that we're now going to have to go back up to hill level as we pass on the left one of the entrances to Merchant Taylor's schools. I think they're sports ground. So there's this slight little climb after that sharp right. We do a 90 degree to the left, and in a moment, seconds after this, there'll be a 90 degree turn to the right and another little ramp that takes us to Sandy Lane Golf Club. You probably will notice these two, and they might shed a couple of people off the back of each peloton group, so beware of these. They're not incredibly steep, but they're enough to just take the pace off. And as I say, if you get dropped off the back of a peloton, this is the second little rise that I mentioned. It will take us up to the golf club in a moment. There's a sort of it's just the other side of this bend. You'll see at the white building in front of us coming up. You can see there is the golf club. Now we turn sharp left there. We're going to go slightly downhill to the foot of the climb to the finish. So, although really this is focused on the climb to the finish, don't ignore those two little ramps in the build up to it. They're not overly steep, but they can take the pace off. And if you're on the back of the peloton, get dropped 20 metres, you might not get back on again. Just remember that, and it's a crucial part of the race. If you're still in the peloton by now, you remember the chance. Now this is the slight downhill to the bottom of the climb up to the NATO headquarters. You can see visually that it's definitely downhill. There's a little gate coming up which sort of kind of marks the end of the Moore Park estate. Once again, they've got a little side gate so that cyclists can get through, which is pretty decent of them, but as I say, they might have some problems justifying locking us out given that they've got a tube station in the centre of their estate. We should be coming up to the white gate any moment now, and then after that we're going to come down to a petrol station, which will be the right turn, and as I say, once we're on that right turn, it's climbing to the end, I'm afraid. So here we are. This is the white posts of the gate. As we go through the cycle lane, they let us out of the estate. We head towards the petrol station, still going slightly downhill, and then there's a very sharp right-hand turn straight onto the big climb at the end. As I say though, don't underestimate that the two little ramps in the build-up could shed one or two people off the back of any peloton group, so make sure you're well placed and ready for those. Not far now to the petrol station, where we turn right. It should be coming, the end of the road should be coming into view any second now. I think you can just about see it now, where the hedge is in front of it. That's where we're going to turn right. You can see it's quite downhill and fast here. I mean, we don't get the benefit of this in real life because we have to slam the brakes on for the junction. Petrol station on our right there, you can just see the entrance. Gas station if you're watching from the USA. Now we're going to turn right. Now you can see from the camera angle we're already on the hill. The bottom of the hill is probably a little bit further down before we join it. But now we're on the hill. So this is the first section, and it's not too steep. I mean, it's quite manageable, and you begin to think when you're on the first section, well, I can do this. This is quite nice. but then it suddenly lurches up a little bit, then gives you some respite, and then goes up again. I would say it's probably steeper in the middle sections when it's going up rather than anywhere else. But I say the first section, you get up to this first junction and you feel quite good, and then it sort of ramps up a little bit. You can't quite see, the sun's spoiling the view a little bit, but up until about now you feel absolutely fine where that car's coming out. Then it starts to sort of get a bit steeper and heavier going on this next section before, say, levelling out a little bit again as we go past the garden nursery, some plants, etc. You can see the car park on the left there. So this is probably about as steep as it gets. It's not a steep climb, it's a reasonably long climb for this area. You can just see where it flattens out the top. Where that car is now is where it flattens out again. This is probably the steepest bit. I haven't actually checked that, I just know this from having ridden it hundreds of times, and you can see just the handlebars shaking a little bit there as I kind of put that extra effort in to get over this final little bit of the steeper section. As you can see, it now levels out. You can see the car in the distance sort of kind of disappears a little bit as we level up. There's a junction on the right and then it goes up again, and it's never quite flat. I'll just say the gradient just goes down a little bit. You get this flatter section like now, so you can speed up. See, its handlebars are smooth now, getting smooth pedal action to go along this section, and you'll see the junction on the right, and when we pass that, which is just coming up now, suddenly you can see, yes, it goes steeper again, doesn't it? Now it's not overly steep. You get this little ramp by the junction, and you can see once again the handlebars shaking a little bit as I probably put a bit of extra sort of downforce to get over this little ramp. But then it settles down again just past this bus stop here on the left, and you then are in the final ascent up until the NATO headquarters. So make sure, if you've got here by now, if you got over that second little ramp, yes, it will still be going up, but it's quite gentle, it's quite manageable, and if you've got the legs, you're sort of in sprint finish area by now. It's not far up. You can see, you can't quite see where it is, but it's not much further on than where we can see the road disappear into the distance. We are very, very nearly there, and if you look on the right of your screen, you'll probably begin to see some wire fences coming up, which obviously are for security at the NATO headquarters, and once you see those, you know that you're coming into NATO headquarters territory. Not quite there yet. You can see the drive to a house just on your right, but we're getting very, very close to where the fencing starts. When the fencing starts, you're there, and I think there's one more house coming up. It's not very far though. There can't be many more before we hit the beginning of the perimeter of the NATO barracks and headquarters. He says one more building coming up. Is this it coming up now? I think we are beginning to see the fencing. We are, you can see that sort of green fencing. That's all security, barbed wire at the top, cameras everywhere. We're outside the NATO defence headquarters there. You can see the fencing slightly more clearly now. Still going uphill, as you can see, as we go round this bend. The fencing very, very visible now. You can tell that there's something that they don't want you to get into that there. And we're coming up now, and it just eases off a little bit as we come up to the finishing line. We're going to finish right outside the gate. It gets slightly easier, so save a little bit for that last 100 metres. And there is the gate, the military headquarters. There's no sign on it. It's that secret. You all know it's there, but they don't tell you. Good luck.